Hi. I'm going to say, with a small risk of sounding a tad like Rhoda Morgenstern, my name is Laurie Gwen Shapiro, and I was born in 1966 in Mount Sinai Hospital because my mother wanted me to have an Upper East Side birth. My first days after the hospital were spent in my parents' Lower East Side apartment on the corner of FDR Drive and Grand Street. I now live with my husband and my 9-year-old daughter, who's sitting there, in the same apartment. Many of the kids I grew up with live in their parents' or grandparents' apartment, or took an apartment in the building before these socialist co-op buildings went to market value. They call our kind lifers. I have 4 other apartments on my floor, all filled with lifers, and since I have known each of the owners since childhood, I've been entrusted with an extra key for all of them. Last month, a 55-year-old woman who used to be a teen neighbor called me panic-stricken from her home in San Francisco to see if I could use one of these extra keys and see if her elderly dad, who I knew since he wasn't old and is now very old, was dead. He had not answered the phone for 2 days. My husband wasn't home, and frankly, I was terrified to do this investigation alone. I rang the door of my very friendly 70-something neighbor, Susan, who I've also known since I was a child, when she was a 30-something parent at my hippy-dippy 1970s first grade. Susan and my mother were part of what was called a white flight, parents who left during the, there was a race riot, and very divisive in the public school system. And a collective of parents left PS 110, where my daughter now goes to school, during the 1970 riots and band together to form something called the Corlears School, which was named after Corlears Hook and was in the bottom of one of the buildings on Grand and FDR. The school was first a parent co-op, and we learned skills from mothers like apple printing and paper making, and we took naps to Born Free. It then moved to a building on 15th Street, and now you can pay $30,000 a year to go to Corlears. When I took a van, I was driven by a man named Solomon. He would take us to school, and he told his young white passengers about Black Power and sang, "I can see clearly now the rain is gone," more than any other song. Well, now, I was in my neighbor's house checking on my possibly dead neighbor, and Susan, my old parent friend, I guess, we checked every room of this apartment, including the balcony, including the showers. And then I called San Francisco to say no one was there, but my elderly neighbor had already called his daughter from a relative's house that he decided to visit, so all was well. Quite relieved, Susan invited me to tea in her apartment. Now, even as an adult, it feels odd to have one-on-one time with a friend's mother that I knew when I was a kid. The apartment had been modernized, but I know this very apartment from when I was a kid, when the decor was the height of 1960s chic. And this was Susan's uncle Ralph Lippman's apartment, and decorated by his wife Eve. With 3 bedrooms and a stretched balcony on the top floor, it's probably the most desired apartment in my building. You see, in my building, people move around, but you don't leave. If a 3-bedroom comes up, you borrow 6 laundry carts from the laundry room for your move. Now, Susan, as it turns out, is now on the board of Corlears, this fancy private school, and wanted to know if I wanted to participate as an original student in an alumni event. And I didn't really, I said, because I had left for another downtown school at 7 and confessed I still had continual nightmares of being made to climb a rope at Corlears by a very brutal gym female teacher that made the lady from Weakest Link seem like a pussycat. And Susan refilled my cup, and her 75-year-old housekeeper, Elizabeth, waved at me as I relived my fears publicly for the first time. Now, I gotta say, I've also known this housekeeper since childhood, when she was 35. When she was Susan's uncle's housekeeper, and Susan still hires her to do light laundry loads so she can magnanimously add to her Social Security check and not have to do her laundry. It is not unusual for me to know housekeepers and nannies in my building from when I was a kid. We are in such a remote location at Grand and FDR, a 20-minute walk from the closest subways. Is it still on? And nannies and housekeepers are guarded and often treated like family. Susan asked Elizabeth to join us, and I said, she said, I'm about to relieve Laurie of her greatest fear. She is still afraid of the gym teacher in Curliers in the 70s. And Elizabeth laughed. She knew the answer I didn't know. Laurie, Susan said, I was the only mother that worked out. The gym was my domain. I was your gym teacher. I had unknowingly faced my demon and was having tea with her. Then we reminisced about my mother, who was also always so embarrassed about having to bought a studio on the Riverside Drive with her own career earnings to move after her marriage to the Lower East Side. Unlike my father, who is still alive, my mother was a people person, and my 9-year-old daughter and I get stopped 2 or 3 times a week by older tenants who want to pinch Jeannie's granddaughter's cheek. Your grandmother, a lady said yesterday, pinching Violet's cheek. She knew everyone. Now, I have halfway to go. Should I stop here? Oh, okay. I'm just going to say that I'm going to just jump ahead here, that the reason we got down to the Lower East Side is that my parents were, I'm going to put this down, my parents were, my father grew up here, but my grandparents were in the Garment Workers Union, and I will say that my grandmother was born in the 19th century. So she was born in 1888, and we didn't speak a lot, I didn't speak any Yiddish, but we communicated, and one of the things she did was take my Barbie, my Malibu Barbie, and it disappeared for a week, and was hysterical. And what had happened is that the Clinton Street, right over here, had used to be the bridal district, the way that there's a flower district and a lighting district, and that was her job. That's how we got into the buildings, and she could do bridal dresses, and she thought it would be great to communicate with her granddaughter by redoing her Barbie, kidnapping her, and putting her in a bridal dress, and snapped off her Malibu Barbie glasses. And it just took me years to recover from this. And I'm going to jump ahead through everything I've written to say that I have to say right now, that is my major connection to my childhood, is the fact that I can open my fine fair bag here, which is the carrying case of the Lower East Side. And I'm going to show you what is my most cherished heirloom in my family, which I've given to my daughter, and represents the past of the Lower East Side to me. If I'm sorry for a second. And this is the Malibu Barbie that has a bit of a vestige of the Clinton Street bridal district on it, and is played with by Violet, and it makes me remember my grandmother, it makes me remember my childhood, and I gotta say my mother was right. I came to appreciate what my grandmother did, even though I didn't in the 1970s. And I just want to give time for everyone else, and I want to say I'm really thrilled that one of my friends is going to be talking today, who I haven't seen since I'm 13, Cameron, who, of course, I ran into him